So the moral of that story is you never know who your Uber driver is going to be. Where that relationship will go. Well, thank you, Summer. Thank you for inviting me. And you know, when Summer first called me about a year ago to do this, I of course thought it was a joke. I thought she couldn't be serious. And I thought actually it was some revenge because I refused to run a marathon with her and Rick Balkin. But she assured me that it was legit. So I began to think about how am I going to put this together. And I thought to myself, well, you know, you're probably going to be thinking, Summer's going, already, Paul? Second thought, let me clean this up for you. You're wondering, who the heck is Paul Peluso? Seriously, who is this guy? And I mean, I thought to myself, did all of the great figures of counseling somehow get marooned on a desert island this weekend? What, me? So I gotta confess, it kind of brought up all my childhood insecurities. I mean, I kind of wondered, you know, am I good to do this? Well, then I began to think about myself, and you know, up until just recently, I was an editor of a journal. An impact factor greater than 1. And in fact, I was even on a Wikipedia page. I don't even have my own Wikipedia page, but I was on a Wikipedia page, so, okay, not bad. I was a president of a division. I was president of IMFC. And as president of IMFC, I was able to increase the membership there, and I brought back a conference in New Orleans, and it was very, very successful. So I had some experiences there. I'm a full professor. I'm a full professor and a department chair at a university with a master's program and doctoral program. Go Owls! I'm a book author. I have several books, many of which are available at the Rutledge Bookshop. I believe at a substantial discount. No. Rutledge people get upset if I said that. And in the very near future, I am going to be participating in the 3rd edition of John Norcross's Psychotherapy Relationships That Workbook. I contributed a chapter. Now, in order to get a chapter in there, it's a chapter on emotional expression in the therapeutic relationship. You have to do a meta-analysis of all the research that has been done on that. In fact, I did not just do one meta-analysis, I had to do 2, one for clients and one for therapists, and then just for kicks, we doubled that and made it 4. So, would you like to know what I found out? Sure. Would you like me to tell you? Good, I'm going to. This coming April, at the ACA conference in Atlanta. Registration is open right now. I believe you still have the early bird discount. David Kaplan and Richard Yep are going, yes! Yes, he said the conference. Woo. I'm going to pause for a second to talk a little bit about this, because this one was really important to me. Because in the list of the chapter authors for this, you have great names in there like John Norcross, Michael Lambert, Bruce Wampold. And everybody else on there are psychologists or folks who are researchers in psychology or psychotherapy and the relationship. My chapter will be the only one that will have a counselor on there. And I felt that was really important because I felt like I was being an ambassador for you guys in doing that. So that has particular meaning for me. But back to the entertaining talk. I also do some cutting-edge research. Some of you know some of the things that I do, some of the people that I work with. I look at the therapeutic relationship. We code the emotion in the therapeutic relationship between counselors and clients. We do some fancy graphs and mathematics with it. And I get to work with people like Paul Ekman and John Gottman. So when I was thinking about this keynote address, I thought, you know, maybe I could do this. Cheer up, chubby, awkward middle school Paulie. You can do this. Now, I hadn't seen this picture in easily about 25 years. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little disturbed at where Santa's hand is. Are you? What's going on there? So as I was thinking about this keynote address, I was also thinking about you. I was thinking about the audience. So what should a good keynote have? Well, a good keynote should make you feel good. It should make you feel good about being here, about giving up your time and your weekend to come. It should also make you feel a little uncomfortable, feel a little challenged in some areas. And then last but not least, I think it should make you feel excited and energized to go back home and to do the work that we do. So that's how I'm conceptualizing forging the future of professional counseling. So let's talk about feeling good a little bit. So when you think about the future, you got to think about the great yogi era. You know, the future ain't what it used to be. And I started thinking, well, what will counselors look like in the future? Let's just imagine that for a minute. I mean, are we going to have counselors on Mars? You know, Matt looks like he needs some help there. You know, he might need a good counselor. Maybe there'll be counselors on spaceships as we go from planet to planet, meeting other species. And in fact, this is a quote from a French astronaut who said the last thing and the only thing that you cannot physically train for is the psychological preparation. So I got a feeling that we're going to be needed out there in the future. But to be honest, you know, for us to know about the future, we would have to be time travelers. And I don't know about you, but I don't think any of us have the abilities of Barry Allen the Flash to run in the Speed Force and go backwards or forwards in time. I don't think any of us have souped up a DeLorean, go 88 miles an hour, and have the flux capacitor take us backwards and forwards in time. I'm sure none of us are Time Lords who have a police box that can go in the time vortex and go forward and backward in time. No. Alex, the pool open tonight. Actually, this came up about a month or so ago. There's actually some new research that in the field of quantum mechanics, time travel is actually mathematically possible. It's possible, in theory, to create a device, an engine that can fold space-time in on itself, and that's about all I really understand. I'm probably BSing a lot of it right there. But apparently there are some very smart people who think this could exist. Time travel. Wow. But I'm going to submit to you that counselors actually are time travelers. I really do believe we are, without all those special gadgets, without all those incredible things. We travel into the past with our clients. We travel into their stories, and sometimes we can even affect the past. We can affect how they see themselves in the past. We can affect how they recall things or the perspective that they take on the past, and that can substantially change them. We work in the here and now. We work in the present, helping folks to stay focused, helping folks to stay mindful in the moment and live their lives better. And we also work in the future. We ask our clients to imagine the possibilities. Imagine the future. Imagine what it would be like if you weren't suffering with whatever you're suffering with. Or imagine what it would be like if your relationships were better, or if your job was better. So really, the possibilities are endless. And they actually are. You know, it's not just something esoteric here saying, oh, well, you're traveling into the future and whatnot. Yeah, Paul, not really. But the reality is that on a quantum level, in quantum mechanics, every choice and every decision that we make creates alternate realities, alternate branches. As a matter of fact, there's a theory of something called the multiverse, where there are an infinite number of Earths, an infinite number of possibilities, an infinite number of you. And in fact, in a number of different alternate realities, maybe there's an evil version of you. Maybe we're all here in Chicago at an ACES conference. But ACES stands for the Association of Criminality, Evil, and Skullduggery. Or, in another alternate universe, you are all here at ACES, And the keynote address is being delivered by Brad Pitt. Sadly, you lost the lottery and you're stuck with me. Okay, a little too sci-fi for you. A little too sci-fi for you. I can do a little bit better though. There's a recent theory that was published that says that actually the future, information from the future, can travel backwards in time and affect the present. Think about that. Information from the future traveling backwards in time and affecting the present. Do you know what that means? That means that the future knew that I was going to be here and talk to you about the future. And as far as I know, much of this information that I'm delivering to you today is coming from the future. Do you know what else that means? If I really bomb this, it's not my fault. It's the future. So in January this year, Wired Magazine did something that it's never done before. Now, I don't know how many people know about Wired Magazine. Wired Magazine is a techie magazine. It's been around for almost 30 years or so, and they publish reviews on hardware and software and other things that are going on in the tech world. But for the first time, in January 2017, they published an issue solely devoted to science fiction. So they asked some of the best science fiction writers out there to contribute pieces, contribute articles to this special edition, and they had only one prompt. Pick a plausible innovation or change in the world and spin out a near-term scenario. Nothing else. What they got back kind of surprised, shocked the editors just a little bit, because the vast majority of the stories, were less than optimistic. They were stories about technology gone awry, stories about biomechanics gone awry, genetics gone awry. There was a lot of sort of negativity, and they weren't expecting that. They were expecting more stories that were optimistic, like Star Trek or the works of Isaac Asimov. And what the editors realized was that the stories reflected the anxieties of the day. And let's face it, there are an awful lot of those today, aren't there? So how they felt about the present really affected how they saw the future. And I began to think about this when thinking about this keynote address, because how we feel about the future of counseling is determined by how we feel about counseling today. Not that counseling today. Counseling today. And I think we have a lot to feel good about. We have licensure in all 50 states. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, counseling is growing at a pace faster than normal, and the 5-year trends are looking good for counselors. We have all the trappings of professionalization. We have a code of ethics. We have professional committees. We have journals. And yes, we have a number of issues that we're still trying to confront and still trying to figure out. So we have nothing to worry about from the future, right? I mean, we're good, right? Nothing to worry about. Oh. Yeah, there's that, isn't there? That's coming up. I mean, think about it. Artificial intelligence. Will we become obsolete? Will AI be able to help clients solve their problems in life? I don't know, it's kind of scary, isn't it? Well, don't despair. There is some good news. A couple of Oxford researchers did some looking at the world of work, and they determined that about 40% of jobs could be automated in the next 20 years. So how's that supposed to make you feel good? Well, if you think about it like this, if that's going to happen, career counselors are going to be fully employed for a long time. Not to mention the anxieties that will come up, so for the rest of us, there's a lot to go around. No, that's not the reason why you should feel good. Not all the reason why you should. You see, they also looked at the world of work and how automation is going to affect it, and how things like artificial intelligence is going to affect it. And they broke down the world of work into 4 discrete categories. There's the manual, repetitive type of jobs. Now, those are jobs that are done kind of like at factory workers. It's the same thing over and over again. And those are very easily replaced by automation. Most of them have already been done, but there are a lot more that will. Then there are those that are manual and non-repetitive. Things like driverless cars. You know, that Uber wants to roll those out in the near future. You know, you'll get in the car and your driver won't be a driver. Then there's cognitive repetitive. Now, these are things that stuff like Excel spreadsheets have taken over, calculations that can be done automatically, or things now that algorithms are able to process and take care of. So we don't have to do it. Things that might require some strategy, but we can program that in. And then there's the last, cognitive non-repetitive. And I'm here to tell you some good news. Counseling is in that last category. We're in that cognitive non-repetitive, along with teachers, lawyers, healthcare workers, supervisors, judges, politicians, sorry about that one, and artists probably, although the authors didn't necessarily want to put them on the list because there are some new developments coming out with computers being able to be creative in creating art. So they were thinking that could be actually a competition for artists, so who knows. And another group of researchers online had a really neat infographic that takes all of the jobs, and on that x-axis is the hourly wage, and on the y-axis is the percent of work that is done that could be automated. So you can also clearly see there where counselors fit, right? I mean, it's easy. Point it out. Come on. No? Okay. Let me make it easier for you. On that website, and if you want to email me, I'll send you the website. It's kind of cool, if you're a geek like me. You can find out where the bulk of the counseling profession is. And that's what those circles are on the right-hand side. The large circle there at the bottom, those are school counselors. The little one, bubble inside that would be, I think, marriage and family therapists. The 2 at the top or 3 there are rehab counselors, mental health counselors, and substance abuse counselors. So you see, there's about 10 to 30% of our work could be automated, but the vast majority of it couldn't. So we're kind of in good shape. Oh, by the way, that red dot out there, I couldn't find counselor educators or professors of counseling. The closest I could get were professors of social work. They had a dot. So let's just kind of figure that's equivalent in terms of that percentage of automation, and there we are. So we're low down on the list. Also towards the lower end of the pay scale, you notice there. By the way, is anybody else curious? And I don't want to zap anybody's eyes with a laser pointer, but on the left-hand side of that graph, what are those little dots all the way at the end that make a lot of money but don't have a lot of automation? Surgeons. Cardiac surgeons and orthopedic surgeons make the most, and their work is the least open to automation. So they'll be the last ones that the computers will take over. So it begs the question, doesn't it? Why exactly are we safe? Why are we safe? Well, there are 3 types of tasks that AI has to solve, that has to be able to do in order to really take over what we do. And these are broken up into 3 different task categories. One are perception and manipulation tasks. Now these are things like being able to grasp things and move things. And then also being able to recognize patterns, recognize that you want this package or that package. Amazon does a great job with this. A lot of big companies are working on that. So that's kind of an easier one to solve, although we're not 100% there yet. Then there are creative intelligence tasks. Those are things that require strategy. Those are things that require planning and being able to predict. And so the world of predictive analytics really gives the computer programmers a leg up on that. Being able to play chess, like a little robot is. And then the last one are the social intelligence tasks. And this is the toughest nut to crack for the AI world. And What are those? Well, those are things like social perception, negotiation, persuasion, and then aiding and caring for others. Now, doesn't that sound like a familiar skill set? Doesn't that sound like something that happens a lot in our world? Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why we're safe. And in fact, ONET, which is the occupation listings online, take that idea of social perceptiveness and they break it down into a number of skills as well. Things like active listening, etc., etc. Again, I say to you, doesn't that sound like a familiar skill set? It's what we do. It's what we do. In fact, that's reflected in their ranking of professions with high social perceptiveness rate rankings. You can see all of our fields are located on there. So I think we're okay for now when it comes to AI. All we have to do is make sure we don't teach the machines social intelligence tasks. Because once they find that out, they find out we're irrelevant. Do I have to do voices now? Is that the Alcana? I'm with me, you have to live. All right, so I know you're saying, well, what about neuroscience, or what about behavior genetics? You know, I hear a lot about that, and I'm worried, because, you know, that could wipe us out. You know, if we learn how to edit genetics and cure depression or anxiety, you know, then what good are we? And then neuroscience, what if we can just sort of, you know, zap some rays in the brain and you know, microsurgery and nanobots and correct neuronal firings and whatnot. That could be a real problem for us, a real threat, right? No, I don't think so. I think that these are tools. They're not threats. They're things that will help us all along. And the reason why I think this is that I think we're going to be needed as long as there are problems in the human condition. I think until we can solve the problems of poverty and education, energy, resource utilization, we're always going to have friction. And then take it down to the personal level, the interpersonal level, relationships. Yeah, we can rewire the brain potentially, we can potentially edit genetics to cure all kinds of mental illnesses, but we still got to learn to live with one another. So I think we're still going to be needed. I think we're still going to be necessary in the future. All right, well then, what about the other professions? Oh, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, this is the part where we get to beat up on all the other ones. They get their comeuppance, right? No, I don't think so, because I don't think that they're threats to us directly. Not directly. I think they're making choices, though, that could affect us. And they're making choices for themselves. I'm going to give you one quick example. Integrated health or integrated behavioral health. American Psychological Association and Social Work Association have put a lot of focus and energy into this. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I'll give you a brief description of it. Integrated behavioral health essentially is the way healthcare presumably will be delivered in the future. We may not see an MD anymore in our primary practices. We might see an RN or a physician's assistant who will then come in and do the usual evaluation, and then embedded in that same practice, you're going to have a mental health or behavioral health clinician in there, maybe somebody who does dietitian and some other things, and it's going to be a total life makeover, one-stop shopping, body, mind, spirit. And psychology and social work have got a jump on us. And they're making decisions to train their students to be able to work in these environments. And these are where a lot of the jobs in the future are going to go. So they're doing what they need to do for themselves. I think that we really need to start focusing on that and things like that. So I have to tell you, I do have a message from the future. I've been holding out on you a little bit. You see, I actually did have access to the TARDIS. Where are my Doctor Who fans? Who fans? All right. Hello, see? I just lost the most of you. I'm sorry about that. But we really are in danger of blowing it. Because the biggest threat isn't external. The biggest threat to counseling in the future is internal. And it's really very simple when you think about it. All we have to do is make good choices today to ensure that we're going to be around and relevant in the future, and not make bad choices. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. And here's what I'm really worried about, folks. I'm really worried about that if we don't make these decisions today, we are going to become the Kardashians of the mental health professionals. We are going to be screaming for people to pay attention to us and think that we're relevant. I don't want to see that happen, do you? Here's what I want to see happen in the future. What if in the future, people went to a counselor first for things that ail them? Going back to medical practice, did you know of the top 10 somatic complaints that people come into their primary care physicians with? Do you know that only about 15% of them are ever found a physiological cause for? Now, that's not saying maybe one doesn't exist, but only 15% have a direct physiological cause that can be tied to the top 10 somatic complaints. And also, did you know that over 70% of the psychotropic medications that are prescribed by either OBGYNs or general practitioners? Psychiatrists only prescribe about 21%. So what would happen if instead of the primary care physician, somebody went to a counselor first? Wouldn't that be something? What if schools use counselors to enhance learning? Academic, social, emotional. We really unleash the power of the school counselor. What if counselors help to solve the problems of humanity in the future? What if, hang on with me now, what if in the future a counselor won a Nobel Prize? Impossible, maybe? Surprising, possibly? Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be something if a counselor in the future won a Nobel Prize? I mean, you all woke up today to the news that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded, and maybe you woke up the last couple of days, it's Nobel season. You get to see, some physicists, some chemists and whatnot. What if it was a counselor? I think it's possible. I think one day there will be a counselor who will win the Nobel Prize. So now I want to talk a little bit about some things that might challenge something. But I think it's important when we're thinking about the future to be challenged in these areas. But in order to do that, I want to set a couple of ground rules. The first is, you know what? We don't have to agree to get along. We really don't. I come from things from a certain perspective, a certain viewpoint, as do all of you. And some of those might merge, and some of those might not. So we don't have to agree to get along, because you know what? I might be wrong. I may very well be wrong, and I'm okay with that. And you know why? Because it doesn't matter either way. It really doesn't. Because all I want to do is I want to get you to think. Do you know what thinking is? I'm going to borrow a quote from Doctor Who, or those of us who are Doctor Who fans call him the Doctor. And he says, you know what thinking is? Thinking is just a fancy word for changing your mind. Thinking is just a fancy word for changing your mind. And so I think in addition to being time travelers, you know what? Counselors are thinkers. We're in the business of thinking. We're in the business of changing minds. And I don't just mean cognitions. I'm not limited like that. I think when you change your mind, you change the way that you see things. You change the way that you feel about things. You change the way that you think about things, and you change the way you act. So I just want you to think because thinking is just a fancy word for changing your mind. So we're good, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is the half-life of facts, or teaching what you've been taught. So, did you know about half-life and radioactivity? It comes from radioactive decay. And it's this idea that if you have, say, a gram of radioactive material, and you know the half-life, say it's 5 years on that chart, come back in 5 years, half of that is going to still be radioactive, and the other half is not. Then you calculate another half-life, and another goes down and down and down. The interesting thing, though, is that you can't look at any one atom in that gram and know which one is going to be the one in that 5 years to become less radioactive. You know that half of it is, you just don't know which half. So you see some examples there. Uranium-238 has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. You have to wait a long time. Well, a Harvard mathematician, Samuel Arbesman, came out with a book, and he did some research looking at fields of study. And he found out that, you know what, facts have a half-life as well. In fact, in any field of study, he says it takes about 45 years for about half the facts that you knew when you started off to be proven false, incorrect, or obsolete. 45 years. You know, it takes only about 22 years for about 25% of the facts that we know to be obsolete. Think about that for a minute. If we go back teaching what we've been taught, how we've been taught, there's a good chance that in 20, 25 years, or for some of us today, a lot of that is obsolete or proven to be wrong or false. And here's the question. How do you know which is which? Now, let's take it outside of our realm, and let's think about things that we used to know were true, things that we used to hold on to tight and believe that have since been proven false. Take a trip down memory lane with me on this one, would you? How many remember the stress causes ulcers idea? Yeah. We know that's not true anymore. How about certain foods and heart disease? Shouldn't eat eggs, shouldn't eat red meat, shouldn't eat... Now we know that there's a real strong link with sugar. Very interesting. How many remember when there was 9 planets in the solar system? Poor Pluto. How many remember the idea that brain cells are fixed? They're fixed in number and they're fixed in function and they can't be changed. And once they die, they never come back. Now we know about neuroplasticity. Now we know about neuronal growth. How about this one, that we use only 10% of our brain? Many women know that men use far less than that, but actually that's erroneous. We use far more than 10% of our brain, just not all at once. How about that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance? But that's a theory that neuroscience and psychiatry no longer believe is true. If you want some really good information on it, about a year ago, NPR did a great series on that. You know who does still believe that's true? The general public. And I didn't say this, NPR did, or the people on NPR did, so don't get me in trouble. But you know who continues to perpetuate it? People who serve to make money off of it. I'm not going to call anyone out, drug companies. But it's a myth that's continued to be perpetuated, even though we know it's not true. How about personality disorders can't be treated? Remember ACES 2? If you were like me, remember you were trained, just put 799 there because it's not going to get paid for and you can't treat it? We know that's not true. And asking about suicidality can plant the seed. We know that that is no longer true. And in fact, it's even more dangerous and more deadly if we don't ask. So it's amazing what you can learn in a little while. So what about us? Are we teaching what we were taught? Are we adding or updating our information? Are you just pulling out the same old PowerPoint slides over and over again? Do you get mad when there's an update to the textbook that you use? Sure, it's easy to say, oh, the book companies just want more money, but maybe there's actually new information in there. And maybe it's not you. You guys are the great and good of the counseling professor, and I know that. So maybe you have colleagues who haven't updated their slides in about 20 years. Or maybe it's us. So are we updating information? Are we teaching the way we were taught? Maybe not so much the information, maybe the way we were taught. We're kind of locked into that. Do we know what is and isn't true anymore? And more importantly, are we teaching our students this? Are we making them aware of it? So I am worried about this. Did you know that medical schools now embed this idea in their curriculum? They tell their students that within 10 years of graduation, a lot of what you learned isn't going to be true anymore. And they get them started very, very early of being skeptical and questioning, looking for the evidence, and continuing to renew their skill set. So what should we do about it? Maybe we should challenge ourselves and each other. We should stay current on research, obviously. Stay current on pedagogy. Maybe start a YouTube channel. Maybe there's one already out there, I don't know. I could be wrong. But maybe one that just demonstrates some of these new practices, new ideas. Maybe we should find a younger colleague and watch them. And not watch them in the usual peer review, I'm the senior professor and I'm going to evaluate you. Maybe we should go and watch somebody who's brand new and learn what some of the new stuff is. Maybe we could also flip the script. Invite them into our classrooms. Not so that we can teach them, but so that they can give us constructive feedback. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe some of you already do that. Maybe we can do academic swaps. Now this is a story from Jeffrey Kotler. Jeffrey always talks about how he's able to get sabbaticals in New Zealand and Australia, and he'll go and he'll swap his house for somebody else's house. Now, maybe we don't want to do that, but maybe we have colleagues who are friends in another university. And maybe we could find ways of working out arrangements where we could go and, if not spend a year, maybe not even spend a whole semester, maybe 8 weeks of a semester. University still continues to pay you, but you work over at another university, and then in exchange, that person comes back and spends eight weeks at your home university. You open up maybe your house. I don't know, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. But what if we did that? What if we swapped and shared information that way? We come to ACES, Seattle, 2019. Marcia and Holly are like, yeah! Maybe we can go elsewhere. Maybe we can go to other professional instructional conferences, find out what they're doing, find out what's new. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is CESNet. Okay, that's not the logo for the CESNet that you're thinking of. Actually, I found this online. This is a Czech internet platform that calls CESNet. So, Martin, I don't know if you have the trademark for that, but if you do, you might want to get your lawyer on it. Okay, so that's what it is, CESNet. So this is what I want to call CESNet, or Marty Gensius invented something that regularly ruins my morning. So I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do is I reach for my iPhone, and I check my email. And I don't know about you, I subscribe to the digest version of CESNet. It's one of the first things that I open. Well, take a look. Rowan University has 2 positions available. And I look for, who has positions available. Not that I'm looking, of course. No, it's for friends, obviously. I want to see what other people are doing in the profession. I'm kind of curious. And then you see it. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. You see that line, and it has a bracket, and it has like 30. And ooh, this is going to be a doozy. And you start to do this, if you're like me. And then eventually, if you're like me, you go, Marty! Now, social media is a great tool for connection. There's no doubt about it. It's a great way for sharing information. It's a great way of bridging people together. It's a way sometimes to sort of cut through the noise and cut through some of the filters. And we see it impacting our lives in every domain, in every area. Why, even politics. Social media helped to get a president elected. Oh, wait a minute. He's tweeting. Let's see what he has to say. ACES Keynote. Sam. Don't call Peluso not funny. ACES could be made great again, but not with this loser. Hashtag make ACES great again. Well, that's just hurtful. CESnet, like a lot of social media, sometimes brings out the worst in people. For example, somebody could post something that I think universally everybody would agree. Man buns look really, really bad on middle-aged dudes. Feel better. But sure enough, somebody's going to object to that and post, man, it's so hot right now. My man bun, my choice. And that'll go on for days. And so when I think about CESnet, I think about the differences between thinking and ruminating. Now, I've already defined thinking for you, right? Thinking is what? Fancy word for?
Changing your mind.
I just got you all to quote Dr. Who. Okay, do this one with me. Ready? No, don't. Focus, Bob, focus. Now, ruminating is to continue to churn over some emotional upset over and over and over again. But do you know where the word rumination comes from? Folks who grew up on a farm, you know this. It comes from cows chewing the cud. See, cows have two stomachs, and when they eat grass, and they put it in the first stomach, it's not fully digested. So a little while later, they burp up some of that, and chew it again. And then swallow it, burp up a little bit more, chew it again. And my friends, I hate to say this, but there are a lot of times when I'm looking at CESnet, and that's all I see. And so now, from this day forward, I would like for many of you, when you see CESnet, that will be all that you see. See, thinking is good, but overthinking can end things before they have a chance to develop. And I think that's what happens a lot on CESnet. Because nobody is ever going to post on CESnet, wow, as a result of your 25,000 word post that went on for 15 screens, I've decided to change my entire worldview and lifelong held beliefs. Said no one ever. I mean, ask yourself, when did shaming someone ever get them to change their position? When did berating and bullying ever get someone to change their minds? When did defensiveness ever result in a positive change? Where's the evidence base for any of that? Where's any of that in our ethics? So there are a lot of people who are responsible for that on CESnet. But today, you know what? This is my keynote. I'm going to call out one. I'm going to call out one person who's responsible for a lot of this continuing to go on. Me. Because I've been a bystander. For those of you who work in the bullying area or are aware of that, you understand what that term means, and you understand where that term comes from. You read on the CESnet, some people will say, I've gotten a lot of back channel responses. I've got a lot of people who have emailed me privately. And I'm here to tell you, I've been one of them. I haven't wanted to get involved in the fray. I wanted to add to it. It bores me. I just get done. But I have been one of those who's been a bystander. Today I say to you, bystander no more. So here's what I'll do. I'm just going to pose, think more, ruminate less. And if people haven't been in this talk, they'll have no idea what I'm talking about. And I'll ask, please stop dividing us. Because I think that's what happens far too much, far too often, and it's hurting us. Now this is what I'm going to do. But if some of you are out there thinking, yeah, he's kind of talking to me, I kind of do the same, I feel the same way, then join me. You know, if one person does it, okay, that's interesting. 2 or more people do it, well, maybe they got something going on there. 10 people do it, it's a movement. If 100 people do it, it's taking a stand. Just a thought, just want you to think about it. The next thing I want to talk about is what I call cyber navel-gazing research. Just challenging. We don't have to be to get along. I might be wrong. Navel-gazing does not mean gazing at someone's navel, by the way. Fun fact. Danica Hayes, at her AARC keynote address, said, "We are publishing a lot of nonsense." And I agree. We survey ourselves about how we feel about ourselves. This is not going to help us in the future. So I'm going to help us out. I'm going to help us out. See, because most of the questions go something like this. How do counselor educators, or counselors, or counselor trainees feel about their efficacy or competency in blank, blank, blank? Fill in the blank. Well, I'm going to tell you. They either feel great, or they feel a little insecure, or they feel like, you know what, it's really unfair, and we're getting screwed from the other professions, and what they're doing is not right. So that's a result. I did the work for you. I calculated the p-value. Ant-Man. Really, really small. Calculated effect size. Big bang. Personal communication, you can cite me on this. You're welcome. So whatever happened to researching counseling? Whatever happened to researching what actually goes on in the counseling rooms, counseling settings? Now I know we've got a great journal out there, CORE, that looks at counseling outcome and research. CORE folks are going, yes. But I think we need to do a lot more of this. And I know, it's hard work. So what should we do about it? I have a thought. I like this quote from Einstein. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would use the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. See, I think that we don't spend enough time knowing what the right questions are to ask. So I'm going to use a 4-letter word. We're all adults, and I know some people are a little more sensitive to others, but I hope you'll offer me a little bit of latitude, okay? It's a 4-letter word. ASCA 15 years ago did a Delphi study to find out what were the most important, most relevant questions in research that school counseling could answer. And yes, I know, ACES helped them with that. I just didn't know if it was appropriate to use 2 4-letter words at the same time. So they did a Delphi study, which I was saddened to learn did not mean you got to travel to Greece and drink wine and wait for the god Apollo to give you a vision. Darn. And just recently, my colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Villares, did a follow-up Delphi study that was published in CES, perhaps. You read it. It was brilliant. It's unbelievable. I don't have a tweet about it. I really should have a tweet anyway. And so I was talking with her about that. Liz works with me at Florida Atlantic. I was thinking about this keynote, and I was thinking about this particular point, and I thought, you know what? The counseling field as a whole should replicate what ACES did. We should do this. We should do a Delphi study to find out what are the most important questions that need to be asked and answered in terms of research in the counseling field. So I decided to invite some friends, some of the best research minds in counseling, including Carl Shapiris, Danica Hayes, and Rick Balkin. Oh, that's not Rick Balkin, sorry, that's Rick Balkin. So, and they all said yes. So I've got 4 of the greatest research minds, and me. And we're going to do a Delphi study. We're going to try to figure this out. Now, we would love to have some help and support, ACES, ACA, AARC. So we'll come knocking on your doors, and more importantly, we're going to need your support. We're going to need your thoughts and your ideas, because then we want to share them with everyone to help focus those questions, to help get the research out there. And the great thing about it is, when you have that there as a framework, how you answer it then gets crowdsourced. Then it's up to you. And I think that would be a great contribution. So we'll come up with the most important question to answer, and then we'll answer them together. So the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of little challenges is something that I see happen far too often. It is the elevation of the term counselor-educator over counselor. And unfortunately, it sets up this dichotomy that you're either a counselor or a counselor-educator. And I worry about this. I worry about counselor-educators who don't identify as counselors. I worry about counselor-educators who don't practice the craft as counselors. I mean, what could possibly go wrong if people who teach counselors don't regularly practice the craft? Now, I know that that's an important term, counselor-educators. I mean, we fought for our identity, and this is a key, crucial piece of it. I get it. And I also get it if you're a young professor out there and you're saying, but I can't. I don't have the time, I don't have the ability. I know what you're under. And for those folks who aren't in tenure track positions, you're working just as hard, but also differently. And for those folks who aren't in tenure track positions, but want to get in tenure track positions, you're working hard because you're probably teaching more, but you realize you've got to keep your scholarship up because maybe someday you get a tenure track position. But they won't give you a tenure track position unless you have some scholarship. There's a lot going on, I get it. So what are we going to do about it? Well, first, I think we have to understand that, yeah, I get it. Some people can't practice, and some people won't. And in fact, there's some people who really don't care to. Jay Haley used to say, apparently, that he thought he was a better supervisor than he was a clinician. And look at the contributions he made. And there are a lot of people who make contributions as supervisors. That's just as important. I'm not diminishing that. Which is why I liked what Dr. Reiner was saying about site supervisors and inviting them into the position by changing how we language that. The other thing that we might want to consider is that for people who are thinking about being professors and clinicians, maybe some of us senior cats need to help encourage them. Need to help make it easier for them. And lastly, maybe we need to push the system, if you're in a tenure system, to accept and value that kind of work as important for your teaching and your pedagogy. Why? Because it's central to what we do. I mean, just think about it. If we're not training clinicians, then what's going to happen to us? We do help in the healing process. And as we've learned over the last couple of months, We are crucial. We are very, very important in that healing process. So looking forward and summing up a little bit here, the problems of the future are teaching what we've been taught, the CESNet-fueled ruminations, cyber navel-gazing, and elevating counselor education above counseling. And I think some of the solutions for it are staying relevant and skeptical, staying united and thoughtful, asking meaningful questions, and practicing the craft of counseling. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about feeling energized and excited. So looking forward, we have come a long way. And we have a lot far to go. The question is, are we ready for it? Are we ready to stand on our own? And I think we almost are. We need to be able to stand as equals amongst other professionals and other professions. We need to stand as equal with other branches of science. And I think we need one more thing. I think we need to define something that I'm going to call counselor science. A science based in counseling. And I think it will have 5 components. I think it has a relational component, a developmental component, an educational component, a behavioral component, and a health science component. I think if we can develop this and we can articulate this as the foundations for counselor science, I think we have a really good shot in the future. You know what? I'm sorry, I can't do this. You see, I'm a fraud. Well, maybe a little bit, but you see, that guy that I introduced you to in the beginning? I was a journal editor, but I didn't write the articles. I had great authors and great editorial board. And yeah, I was IMFC president, but I had a great supportive board and great supportive members. And yeah, we did really, really well our first time out in our conference, but we did even better the next year when I wasn't president. And we're even going to do better this year in 2018 in February in New Orleans. Registration is available now. Rick Bradley and Brian Campbell are going, yeah! And being a chair of a department, folks, I know I'm going to get some brushback on this, but I've got the greatest faculty. I'm sorry. I got people like Len Sperry, Greg Brigman, I got Brian Canfield, I got Liz Valaris, I got Carmen Gill, I got great people like Kelly Amelia, Chet Key, Melissa Mariani. We just got Hannah Bowers. I mean, we're kicking butt, people. I've got a great crew, and although I can't officially announce it, we might be expanding. So be on the lookout. It's not about me. I didn't do that. They've done that. Oh, and you know that chapter that I was telling you about that I'm really, really excited? I had a fabulous co-author in my former doctoral student, Dr. Robert Freund. Now it's SUNY Oswego. SUNY Oswego in the house? All right, well, you got to shout out anyway. And then my research. Now, anybody who knows me, anybody who knows my research, knows that I talk about my Alliance Lab, and more importantly, I talk about my Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Because they are Earth's mightiest researchers. They're the people who do the work to make it happen. I especially like that picture. That was our presentation with John Carlson about 7 months before he died. And he joined us at ACA. We've been able to do some great things, but not because of me. It's because I've had great people to work with me. And that's the point. The point is that nobody can do this alone. We need to stop looking for some great man or great woman to come and save us and show us the way. We need to look to each other. We need to work together. We need to support one another in our endeavors. We need to share. We need to stop with the competition. I mean, I think about things like the future of our departments in higher education. And I think that we need to support folks who are going forward in administration. We need to support, we need more counselors as deans. We need more counselors as vice provosts. We need more counselors as provosts. I mean, we have some of the greatest people right now as deans who come from this body. People I'm proud to call friends. And I think when they want to go further and further, we need to support them, because in turn, they're going to help spread our message across academia. Now, I don't know if we have one of these yet. I didn't check. But just imagine, what if we had a counselor who was a president of a college or university? Wouldn't that be something? So putting it all together, yeah, we got some pitfalls for the future. We got some potential solutions. Because I think they fit into what we are, who we are, and what we do. Because in the end, my friends, the world doesn't need me. It really doesn't. And I hate to say it, the world really doesn't need you. The world does need us. It needs who we are. It needs what we can do together. And my friends, that's the future of professional counseling. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a great day.